live. Yeah, look at, we're almost on time even. Like, we have a couple minutes of prep.
Yeah.
Is Sean, you situated? You feeling good?
Yeah, I got my water and everything. And I have a stack of apocalyptic role-playing game books near to hand.
That is amazing. I'm gonna put my one apocalyptic thing that I'm talking about recently. But otherwise...
What? I can't see that. What is that?
That is our new game for that launched on Tuesday. But let's talk. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for being one of our exciting guests for Apocalypse Month of July. I know you're a fan of the Apocalypse Engine, one of the biggest indie RPG engine for games. Yes. All right, so now I'm gonna get this caffeine in my face, and now we're gonna start chatting.
Great.
All right. Hey, everybody! Welcome to the Board Game Live, and this month is Apocalypse Month. Woohoo! We kicked it off with Epic Realms last week, with a podcast that's famous for authors and other kinds of stuff. And now my guest is one of my fans. I mean, somebody I'm a fan of, which is Sean from Scene 4. I am a huge fan, Sean. I find your content extremely liberating. You're someone who has a 180-degree perspective on being a GM from where I am from. And I feel like you are educating me on how evolved we can become. I feel like it is such a big deal for me. I love being one of those GMs who does 4 hours of prep for every 1 hour of play. And I love that. I'm actually only 2-to-1, the guy who wrote the book, Favorite Local Game Store, his name is Gary Ray. Gary writes a 4-to-1 campaign, and I would stab anybody to be in that campaign. Yeah. But I think you have the right of it. I think this institutionalized damage does not help role playing. I understand 100%.
I strongly believe there is a place for for the world builder, for the person who wants to dump hours and hours into the verisimilitude of their world. I feel like all that work is wasted if you don't have players running around in it and giving you new ideas and messing with your stuff. But I'm a play at the table bitch now. I'm I have to have I'm running so many games that if I were preparing that much in advance for them, I would have no time to eat.
Can I talk about this in two ways? All right.
Yeah.
First of all, I've been on panels about this at conventions about being a GM and prep and so forth and whatnot. And to do what I like to do, number one, you have to have time for it. And number two, your expectation on a good session is that they will interact with 30% of the stuff that you produce. That is if you are lucky, right?
Yeah.
And so it needs to be purely about your own excitement to build worlds and to author this stuff.
Yeah.
That is great. But I think in a modern environment and to play a lot of campaigns and be a professional GM like you are, I think improvisational skills, like spending time being more comfortable and better collaborator for improvisational GMing is a better use of your time.
Well, but there's no replacement if doing the prep work is what you love, right? If that's what you love about it. The thing is, there are so many people who don't like it and are like, oh, well, it's a shame I have to do it.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You absolutely don't have to. And your content is a constant reminder to me that is a thing that can happen. One of the exercises that I saw you talk about, or maybe you talk about this on the regular, is, hey, want to start a campaign? Don't want to do a bazillion amounts of things? Here's your minimum. You have 5 factions that are doing 5 different things, and when the players interact with them, that moves the needle in one direction. And that, I think that is just an amazing way to think about sort of how to create a dynamic world. Like, set down your player party, put down the 5 factions, and then that can be your minimum for it's great. But I will stop gushing.
That's where I got it. That's where I got it.
But that is how you got on my radar, and at the core of me as a player, I am and a GM. I'm a role player first, but as somebody who makes games, we wrote our own role-playing game and board games. I have a calling to write board games. I feel like I have too many damaged parts of me to be a professional GM. I'm too old now. I can't do it. Like, I think you have to be like a professional athlete or ballerina. You have to be under a certain age to be able to do it.
I don't know. I've met some folks who have literally been playing for 50 years and are still agile as ever. I met Steve Jackson at Gen Con last year, and I was I thought it was remarkable how quick Steve Jackson was. Gen Con.
Oh, I love Steve. Him and his non-binary sidekick. I love so much. The two of them, I've watched Steve light up in the last probably 12 years, and it has almost everything to do with his social media manager. The two of them together have really just sort of become magical.
Yeah.
Have you gone to GameHole Con yet?
I've not. I
should
started going to conventions last year, and this is going to be my second year going to conventions.
All right, so I would put, for you as a professional GM and role player, I would put GameHole Con on your radar. It is probably the largest growing RPG convention in the Midwest. It is the 3 RPG conventions that I think people should absolutely consider. Just for its size, Gen Con is really good. Metatopia is
that's another one I really wanted to
I think Metatopia and GameHole should be on your list, John. I think that is absolutely fantastic. All right, so folks who are familiar with the Board Game Live and not familiar with Sean, give your brief introduction and your jumping in point to gaming and to being a professional nerd or a semi-professional nerd.
Yeah, for sure. My name's Sean. I go by Scene4 on TikTok and occasionally Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts. I have been playing role-playing games for maybe, I got to do the math, for 13, 14 years. I think 14 years, started GMing 13 years ago with Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, which still has echoes, I think, in my work today and in my soul. And then I started making videos a couple years back on TikTok and talking about giving GM advice and talking about independent RPGs. I started because I started game mastering professionally in 2020, and I've been doing it now for 4 years, and I support myself. That's my full-time job, is running RPGs.
That is what I wanted people also to know and hear. Your content is solid. It's on point. You have a clear message. You're always being very helpful, particularly fusing the gap of trust that can end up being between adversarial GMs and players. Some of your best content, to gush in your direction, is about stop fighting with each other. Your characters are fighting with each other, but you as players and GMs are working together. And you should really work on trust. As you are collaborating to make something as big as a role-playing epic or a story, you should really, really be working together. Is that fair for me to summarize?
That's extremely fair. It's like I want to dismantle the depiction of the GM as like the steeple-fingered, shadowy figure, like in the huge in the background against the party, and shrink the GM down to be holding hands with them. Like,
I feel so embarrassed. You're like, this old guy's been stalking me. What is all that?
I wouldn't put my videos up if I didn't want people to look at them.
No, it's so good. It's so good, and I think that is wholly definitely the case. There's a lot of ways for people to professionally GM. Our former chief volunteer Wendy plays in one of those, like, hey, give me $30 and then you can be a session and you can be in my kind of shenanigans.
Sure.
I forgot what that platform is called.
Start games, maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
I work with SPG from time to time. I currently have a game on there, but it's like generally my public games get booked solid, and I run a lot of private games now. Basically, I had enough return clients.
Fan base, people who like your stuff.
I'm like on retainer now.
I've been wanting to ask you, so for those kinds of things, do you set a story length? Do you set a session length? Like, hey, we're going to be in this world, this many total sessions, and blah, blah, blah. Like, how do you keep it fresh with those people? And, because even as a GM, you can get burned out on worlds and situations and systems. Yeah. How do you, make sure that people have that epic feeling of closure? Yeah. Like, do you do it by seasons? Do you do it by story arcs? What do you end up doing?
Yeah, so campaign endings are super important to me. Like, I feel like I have finished more campaigns than a lot of people have started. I believe very strongly in endings. I try to never let a campaign fizzle out. So up front, I will usually be like, based on my experience with the system, I'd be like, this system is good for maybe 12 to 24 sessions. That's what I expect we'll play in it. And with some groups, especially groups that I've been playing with a long time, we'll start a system, and I'll be like, what length do y'all want to go for? And they'll be like, indefinite. And I'll be like, great. Because if I know indefinite from the start, then I can build around that, right? I can make sure I'm always planting seeds and being prepared to let new kind of dramatic arcs sprout or die off if they get ignored. But
then you also need the number one thing. The number one thing, if you're going to do indefinite, you need to have confidence that your players have a life that's flexible enough that they can prioritize indefinite.
Yes. Yeah.
That's true. Player availability and adult schedules are the death to all campaigns.
I will say this. I find that if you are literally putting money down to make sure that you're playing every week, you tend to show up more often. Like, my home games still get canceled sometimes, though I'm not a big canceller. It's very rarely me canceling. But like my paid games, they run. They don't cancel.
That is amazing.
Literally invested.
That is also something we discovered with our Gen Con schedule. When we made the price the minimum for the Gen Con ticket, it was very likely that half of the people wouldn't show. When we doubled the price for the tickets, suddenly that no-show rate plummeted.
Yeah.
Because people understand that this is a more serious thing, and so it is also one of the reasons that I suggest people get a battle buddy for either game design or workout buddies or a gym coach. When you start putting actual it's easy to deflect little things that would eat up your schedule. You're like, no, I I already paid for this in advance. I'm sorry, I cannot do this thing.
Yeah, I recently joined a martial arts studio because I have to exercise more, and putting money down every month makes sure that even when I don't want to get up at 9:45 and go to get kicked, I still do it.
Well, that's also the secret that health insurance companies did for reimbursing people for gym memberships and other things like that. They're like, if you can prove that you were at the gym like 3 times this month, we'll pay for it.
Wow.
You didn't know they did that, did you?
Will they pay me? I wonder.
You should check to see if you can. All right, Sean. Gushing aside, on today's topic, as part of Apocalypse Month, is our favorite apocalypses. And when you thought of role-playing apocalypses in your special area, do you have a specific story, like running or playing in an apocalypse game, or do you have like you want to start out the topic with this serious recommendation or this curveball? What feels good?
Oh, well, I mean, I have plenty of stories from games, but obviously when I hear apocalypse in my context, I have 2 thoughts. The first, of course, is Apocalypse World, and the second is Blades in the Dark, which is maybe I should stop hedging. It's my favorite game. It's my favorite RPG.
All right, so let's start with Apocalypse World. For people who don't know the Apocalypse Engine or powered by the Apocalypse Engine, talk about its setting, its appeal, and why, of course, you would jump from like Dungeons and Dragons or a White Wolf game to Apocalypse World.
Yeah, so Apocalypse World is the brainchild of the Bakers, Vincent and Guy Baker. It's like it's like Mad Max. It's like I mean that's definitely the best touch point I have for Apocalypse World. It's like usually a post-nuclear apocalypse. There's a wasteland. It's about scarcity. It's about striving for human connection and relationships in the aftermath of a terrible world-ending disaster, and it is it is most people's. Well, weirdly, a lot of people know PBTA, or Powered by the Apocalypse. A lot of people know this game's kids. But I feel like Apocalypse World is somehow, like the original, is somehow still underrated. And I think
talk about the dice and character system for like Powered by Apocalypse games. Like, totally. How does that differ from games that people might be more familiar with but shouldn't be?
Yeah, right. So most people are familiar with roll a d20 or a d100 and try and beat this number. And if you do, you succeed at your task. You open the safe or pick the lock or hit the guy or whatever.
Right.
But Apocalypse World, it uses 2d6 for that nice bell curve, and it has 3 bands of success. If you get a 6 or less, that's a miss, which doesn't necessarily mean you fail, but it does mean you didn't get what you wanted, right? If you're trying to pick a lock to get into a building, maybe it means you do pick the lock, but there are a bunch of guards on the other side. So you did what you were trying to do, but it might just mean you can't pick this lock, and actually there's a gun at the back of your head now. And then of course there's the partial success or the mixed success or the weak hit, which is on the 7 to 9 result. The most probable results, actually, rolling 2d6 plus 1 or 2, is a success. You do what you were setting out to do, but there's a cost, there's a complication, there's a choice. You don't do it as much. And then, of course, a 10 or above is the unmitigated success. So not only is it breaking away from sort of the binary nature of do you pass, do you fail, it's also breaking away from task resolution and into conflict resolution. Do you get what you want? Did you did this work out well for you, rather than did you jump high enough? Did you were you good enough? Were you skilled enough?
All right. So one of the things that people are looking for in that game is that suspense moment and that big explosion moment of either rolling a 20 or rolling a 1. Like, how is that present in Powered by the Apocalypse games?
Oh, well, I think a lot of the excitement around rolling a 20 and rolling a 1 is the fact that as soon as the dice hit the table, you know immediately that's good or that's bad. Like, there's the instant recognition of and I think Apocalypse World accomplishes that in 2 ways. One, you already know the number you're trying to hit. If you roll the dice and it's a 10 or better, like that's you got what you wanted. Like things are going to work out well for you. Like if you rolled low, you know when the dice hit the table. Like the math is very simple, so it's very easy to recognize. No one is ever keeping the target number a secret from you. And then the other is you know what consequences are on the table when you roll. So like, in the earlier example, you miss the lockpick and somebody's got a gun to the back of your head. Now you know whatever you do next, the risk is like, does the trigger, like does the gun go off? Does someone pull the trigger? And you actually know what the stakes are. So no one's hiding the stakes.
So the GM tells people the stakes before they roll?
Almost always in Apocalypse World. Like there's a principle
that creates that sense of tension.
Yes.
Like you understand the 3 choices. Which one is it's going to be? So after they roll and they understand the consequences, who narrates in your games? Who narrates the result?
Oh yeah. So a lot of times this is like sort of conceptualized as when you succeed, it's you're in narrative control. You get to say what you did, and when you fail, that's when the GM steps in and gets to make a move, gets to change the situation. So you usually, before you roll, like you say what you want to do, like what you want to accomplish on a success. And the GM's like, cool, great. So if you succeed, you get to tell me how you open this door and break your way into the building. But if you fail, I'm going to tell you how things get way worse for you. Like I'm going to tell you whose gun gets put, like you feel on the back of your head.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Darren, who's a regular to our lives, is it safe to say Blades in the Dark is your favorite Powered by the Apocalypse game?
I think that's safe to say. There are
tell us why, and tell us what Blades in the Dark is for folks who don't know.
So Blades in the Dark is a system that is definitely based on Apocalypse World. The systems are a little different, but like in large part, it is inspired by the philosophy of Apocalypse World, at least. It is a game of industrial fantasy and crime. It's like Peaky Blinders meets Bloodborne. You are scoundrels in a haunted kind of Victorian era fantasy city doing crime and upsetting the status quo and ideally getting away with it.
Is there mystical elements? Is it like V for Vendetta? Like,
yeah, for sure. It is haunted fantasy. It's like ghosts and occultists and demons and stuff like that. There is absolutely a supernatural element that's based on kind of 19th century occultism, if it was real, and also demons, you could talk to them.
That's amazing. You're selling me on this. If you have not already, you're selling me on this. So, as per today's topic, which is Apocalypse Month here on the Board Game Lot. And we talked about Mad Max settings and so forth and whatnot. As a story-driven GM, what do you think your why character like players are excited about dystopian and post-apocalyptic settings, themes? What do you think it unlocks for players?
A sense that the status quo has already been upset once before. Like, I think if you're playing a game in like Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings fantasy,
Right.
that world feels very crystallized. It feels very solid. It feels like you're not really going to change the landscape of that world. In a post-apocalypse, the world has already fallen once. And anybody, right? Anybody who has the drive and the ambition and maybe the resources or skills to pick up the pieces and build something new or change things, like, it's already been established that that's possible. So if you want to, like, in Blades in the Dark, for example, the apocalypse is the gates of death are broken, so there's no more afterlife, which means that ghosts stay here in the world after people die, and the sun exploded. So there's no sun. There's no sun, and there's no death. There's just ghosts and darkness.
And eternal pain.
Yes.
Eternal pain.
And demons. Yeah. And it's like, and yet people go on. They still went ahead and they built another society about it. And it's corrupt as fuck, of course. And like
So let's talk about flavors of the apocalypse.
Sure.
And where people can jump in. Like, when you talk about apocalyptic stories, you can talk about, like, the just after aftermath. So, like, for people, if you're looking for something in the genre for that, that is definitely, like, The Road. You don't know, like...
Of Us, maybe.
Yeah, that's the next step right there.
That's the
like,
next step. Okay, so we're looking for right afterwards, super direct afterwards.
Like, it's going on, and people are trying to connect to form those first. Like, The Last of Us literally is about the people starting to pick up those pieces again.
Yeah.
And so,
like, Mad Max 1, the first Mad Max is there.
Yeah, it's all like it's like
it
is in the stage. You can still hear the echoes of the bombs or whatever, or the disease or whatever, like something, the dragons, whatever the thing is falling.
Yeah.
And the second, and that's a post-apocalyptic is almost different than like apocalyptic. So, like 28 Days Later, and I Am Legend is both examples that this has already happened, where World War Z is an apocalypse story where these things are happening right now. The world is like in rapid fall and no one will be able to catch it.
Yeah. But in both cases, I think what's really exciting is that the rules are gone. Like, the rules of society are gone. And will we, like, in the absence of rules, like, will we try to rebuild a society? Will we try to carry on the legacy of society? Or are we just going to go wild? Or do we build something new? Like, do we build something new? Do we build something old? Or do we just run rampant?
One of my favorite forms of the post-apocalypse is when society does not realize that it has already collapsed. And so two great examples of that, of course, are Idiocracy and Escape from New York.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Right? In both of those instances, everything has broken down, and people who had enough power to try to, like, scrape together something, and then people are making very hard choices, and like, hey, this could have been the Colonel to save us from Plutoxin 7, but Snake Plissken will not be. Like, all societal rules have been thrown out.
Yeah, the incapability of imagining something better.
Yes. Yeah, imagine something better. One of the things I love in those instances is the constant reminder that doing bad things to bad people is still doing bad things.
It can be it can feel satisfying, but yes, it like doing perpetrating violence is always a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Yes. There's always backfire. There's always kickback. There's always recoil when you go around pulling triggers.
Yeah. So after we have our rebuilding some version of community, or things have failed, but the community is, like just in a state of decay. The third one, of course, is the established dystopia, typically authoritarian in nature, or like psychedelic in nature. That's the other one, or both. Like in the case of Zardoz, like you have people like creating these like of the aftermath. They have or Planets of the Apes. They have created a thing that in itself either echoes or amplifies some of the worst choices in people building society already.
Yeah. I think about kind of Disco Elysium with this as well. That's a great example of that's a great example of a society that kind of either doesn't acknowledge or refuses to acknowledge that it's in the midst of an apocalypse. But also, like, the whole point of Disco Elysium is in that game you have a world which is stuck reproducing its own cycles over and over again, and is literally being consumed by the past. Like, there's not to like spoil it too much, but there's a force in Disco Elysium that is like basically the past that is like eating the world.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a great game. I recommend it to everybody, especially if you love kind of apocalyptic. But it's the same thing as you were talking about, like the need to reproduce what we had before the world ended by force, if necessary, ends up making a much worse thing.
The need to try to right wrongs. And the solution set that people like in Gattaca is another example, is a dystopia. Like role-playing dystopias, obviously paranoia, if we're talking about Steve Jackson, like all these choices made, paranoia is the quintessential classic, like old school, like a million charts, zany amounts of unaliving, like just absolutely. What would you recommend in modern independent RPGs that has a great dystopia at its core that players are either exploring, learning? Like Aeon Flux was an interesting version of a dystopia in its own thing. Obviously, The Matrix is an amazing dystopia that you have to like ask yourself, was their solution right? When is your solution wrong? Like the players having to ask themselves about like, so what gives you that Logan's Run or Matrix feel that you like, where you're questioning the solution, Sean?
Whoa, that's a really good question. I don't know. There's like I'm trying to think. Like, I'm thinking about like a lot of that stuff reminds me a lot of like cyberpunk. My favorite cyberpunk game is actually it's a cyber plus punk, which is kind of a one-shot system. It's like a one last job kind of.
Let's talk about one shots. If folks are new, like if they're from the Board Game Live, let's talk about con games and talk about one shots and talk about their length and their nature. That's a great topic, especially in and around like very weird settings like dystopias and other things.
Yeah, the one shot is sort of like it's almost like the transition point between board game and RPG, because the one shot is designed as a single session, like single play, self-contained experience. Where like from beginning to end, you will tell a completely self-contained story. Ideally, you'll sort of experience all the mechanics. You'll learn to play as you go, and by the end, you'll have a story that had a beginning, middle, and end. That like that
It is much like, I like to describe it, if fans of the Walking Dead comic book, if you take one person's story in the allegory or the anthology of all those zombie whatevers, that could be like a one shot.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can play a single chapter, and I generally I prefer to play games that are designed as one shots. Speaking of apocalyptic games, I've got the Quiet Year.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that.
That's
that fits in. That fits in our just after stage 2 of the apocalypse,
yeah, totally.
Which is like people now have these caravans. They know they want to work together. They want to come up with a solution. And instead of being about like guns versus raiders, it is now about people trying to find solutions in a changed world.
Yeah, it's our community versus our community.
Okay, yeah. Tell people about the Quiet Year, and I will interject as a board game designer and a role-playing game designer, like where the gamified elements give a person an exciting place to jump in.
Yeah, totally. So the Quiet Year is a map drawing game where you start with a blank piece of paper, and over time you will draw the map of a community that is trying to build some kind of functioning society in the wake of of an apocalypse. And you do this by it comes with these cards. There's 52 cards for 52 weeks in a year. So you have each card represents a week and gives you a prompt for what happened that week. And so every week you draw a card, something in the community changes, and then each of the players can take an action to sort of change things or hold a discussion or start a project.
It is an amazing world building exercise, communal world building exercise. We talked about this a little bit. Uga Chaka, thank you for showing up. I think I saw you show up for the End of the Line Kickstarter 2, and I super duper appreciate that. Uga Chaka is one of our regular. For folks who are just jumping in, I have the amazing guest, Scene 4 himself, Sean, and we are talking about our favorite apocalypses as they pertain to role-playing games. The Quiet Year, in our own, Fight the Box's own, indie stream of content, we did our playthrough of The Quiet Year. It was super fun. You do start with a deck of 52 cards, things that happens. You start with benefits and penalties to your civilization. And over the course of time, you are talking about how this year unfolds, which was the year that massive raider attacks didn't happen. The rebuilding year of Gastown or Bullet Town or any of those kinds of places. It is absolutely fun. And if you have a group of people who where there's multiple GMs and you want to do something in a one shot or one or two sessions max kind of situation, The Quiet Year is an amazing recommendation.
It has been also for the question before about established dystopias that now and it's Spire, The City Must Fall, where you play as dark elf resistance fighters who are uprising against the high elves who are they're far future cybernetic super advanced technology, and you are this oppressed underclass of dark elves who are fighting back against them and trying to topple their civilization.
That's amazing. Where do you get the Spire game? Before you think about that for a second, Quiet Year you can get from Heart of the Deer Unicorn. They are the distributors for a lot of the indie RPGs that we're going to talk about in this next like small indie weird section. Heart of the Unicorn has the distribution rights or is a distribution partner for those games. Yeah. Where can somebody get something like Spire?
Fire and Heart, which is another sort of companion game in the same system, are both from Rowan Rook and Deckard, I think. So they're the people, they made Die, the RPG. They just came out with Eat the Reich. And Hollows is their...
Hollows, I saw stuff about Hollows.
Yeah, that's also a kind of dystopian one, too.
Oh, so good. So we have this, things have just fallen. We're going to try to piece things together and connect with others. So in each one of these stages of post-apocalypse to dystopia, you have, is there anybody to connect with? That's the first stage. Is anybody left? Is anybody out there? The 28 days later, that moment which it starts with, is there anybody left, is the core of that first type of post-apocalyptic setting. I love that, obviously. Second is people are banding together. What can we build with what's left? Are we salvageable, or should we just let it all go?
Yeah.
Right?
It's so interesting that you're talking about the sort of stages of apocalypse, because I've just been reading this game, which is called Legacy: Life Among the Ruins, and what it does is it does that. It goes from right after the apocalypse, and this game is kind of unique because you're not really playing a single character. You're playing a family or a faction, and your character at any given time is the leader of that group. And so everybody at the table has a faction, and this game is called Legacy because it takes place over a very long stretch of time, and it has those phases of okay, we're just coming after the collapse of civilization, then we're building something, now we have something built, how do we maintain it? And the interplay is between the characters and the different families and factions.
That is amazing. The chat said something very interesting. They said Legacy is good, but it's fiddly as hell. So is fiddly crunchy? What would you consider to be fiddly? Is it old school, just there is one chart and 6 pages for each mechanic that you're doing? What flavor of fiddly is Legacy?
I feel like crunchy is more it's like a writing style or a sort of didactic style way of teaching a game, as in terms of charts and numbers and stuff. So I think a game can
for crunchy, just to be specific, it is you have to combine a whole bunch of numbers to get a target.
Yeah.
Oh, look I have this modifier, this modifier, this modifier, this matter. Now I need to do all this futzy little math.
Right.
Generally for board gamers, that is what crunchy looks like. But go on.
Fiddly, I feel like has to do with how many little moving parts and chits and bits and pieces there are. And I can see that for Legacy, right? Because Legacy has a lot of moves. Which in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, which this is, they're little fictional triggers. So when your character or your family does this specific thing, here is how that is resolved. And so there's a lot of those that you as players and GMs need to be on the lookout for. You have to sort of be, you always have to be listening to know when oh wait, did we trigger wasteland survival here? Are we triggering claim by force? What are we doing here? Did we do it? Have we triggered a move? And yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. I
like that a lot. When I play a game like Wander Home and the character has individual role play, I list those out, so I'm constantly on the lookout for these triggers of things that I want to accomplish.
Sure.
And that is the best thing of that flavor of RPG, is it gives your character goals as part of the character creation process. One of the reasons that I mentioned Wander Home is Wander Home. Where does it fit in our 3 sets of post-apocalypses?
Oh, really? That is a great question. A lot of people don't realize that Wander Home is absolutely a post-apocalyptic game.
All right, how would you describe Wander Home, and then I will talk about Wander Home as well.
Wander Home is a game about homelessness. It is a game about finding connection in a scarred and traumatized world. It takes place in the aftermath of a failed rebellion against I would say probably a crumbling monarchy. I would say it's almost like a non-technological dystopia.
It is, and I love to tell people it is a post-apocalypse where a world where the world has given up on war. Because your characters literally in Wander Home, if they succumb to violent urges, they go feral. They become beasts because they're all anthropomorphic animals. It is, and so there's no stealing and there's no robbing, and that is so unique.
There's definitely thievery.
Is there?
Yeah,
I didn't think you could.
There's a playbook for the vagabond in Wander Home.
Oh.
Who absolutely can thieve and steal, and can be wanted for that.
That's good.
I do like the phraseology of the world is done with war. I think that's true because the world is post-war. And there is a sense of hopelessness that sort of followed the aftermath of the last war. The rebellion lost. They don't want to fight anymore. The presumably other side would have been like the royalists or the monarchists. They won, but they don't want to fight anymore either.
They can't. Yeah,
the world
cannot. You cannot. Yeah. And still, there's a little bit of mystical elements. It creates this incredibly. So in our sidecast, which we call Low Gamers Apocalypse, my creative director usually runs the games for us, and I am famous for making amazingly tragic characters. And so the end of our playthrough, knock on wood, had the other players crying while I recitated the end because my GM refuses. The more tragic my characters are, the more he is determined to try to get me to accept a happy ending for them. And it creates these super sweet and sour moments. It is super charming, and it is a love letter to maybe some of the personal things that I've been through.
Ending. I gotta be honest.
You love a downer ending?
I'm a sucker for it. I love the downer. It's like
I think that's what makes you a great guest for this particular topic. Ultimate downer endings, obviously, with either short runs or one shots, is Dread.
Oh, totally.
The Dread is a game where sitting down at the table, you understand somebody's gonna get a downer ending.
Yes. Well, and then there's 10 Candles, where the understanding is everybody is going to get a downer ending.
All right, so you talk about 10 Candles. I'll talk about Dread for folks who don't know.
That's one of the things. That's another right after. Well, it does not always. There are different playbooks, but 10 Candles is there is some force that came to Earth and snuffed out all the light. So it's like the lightless world, and it's meant to be played entirely in the dark, only by the light of 10 little tea light candles.
Yes.
And every time someone fails a roll in that game, you extinguish one of the candles. And when all 10 candles are gone, everybody dies.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I love
die already.
Yeah, I love that so much. Conversely, one of the things that I've realized as an industry person and gaming person, that people all have different journeys that they're on in gaming, and they're picking up skills. And it's really interesting. One of the entry level games for people is obviously Jenga. When you take something that's an entry level game like Jenga and then you add it to what I would consider to the other end of role playing, which is sort of very narrative driven, very much make a deal, like it's all of it's Monty Hall. And Dread, like good Dread games are like, okay, if you want to do that, but you're going to have to pull this many, and this is the kind of thing. Or do you want to fail automatically? And if you fail automatically, you still succeed in the base thing that you need to do, and then your character has this other terrible, like, it is. And so marrying those two things, which is the beginning of somebody's board game journey and somebody who has taken a wrong way turn into role play.
Don't do it. Don't make don't do it. I don't know how dramatic the board game community can be, but I know that the RPG community is addicted to drama. Don't go.
You should come and visit with like a board game TikTok is amazing. And
everyone I met
there's
super cool.
The thing is, because we see each other on the regular, like multiple times a year, a lot of drama is really put aside when you know you're going to go have fun with somebody, when you're going to go play games with somebody in person, and when you can like bond over a thing, right? And so, I absolutely love the board game TikTokers. I know I'm too old to be amongst them, except for Jared. Jared and I could be in one end of the board game TikTok pool, but like, absolutely, as a group, they are absolutely fantastic. And we literally take a time like once or twice a year to make up fake drama.
What?
Like fake drama is yeah, fake drama. It's like sleeve or no sleeve. Like Jared started the sleeve or no sleeve war, which is the biggest like fake drama something. Is Mondo Davis actually a real human, or is he been like lying about his thrift talk? That was a fake one. Oh, yeah, it's absolutely great. Sean, we are in the last 10 minutes, which is generally the wrap up. But I feel like we've just scraped the surface of this topic.
Yeah, I feel like every time I think of a new game, I'm like, oh, hey, that's post-apocalyptic too. I think.
Would you mind? My guest next week actually canceled. Would you be willing to come back to reprise this topic and we go deeper dive? Do you have this
next week? Unfortunately.
Oh,
I will be.
Maybe I'll have
out of town. I don't know if I'll have a really stable internet connection.
Oh, all right. Well, if any of my regulars or Jared, I would love to hear from you. If you want to talk about a post-apocalyptic board games, Jared, your collection is massively huge. Please let me know. I'd love to have you as a guest again. But Sean, you're an absolutely fantastic guest. So now that we are in the wrap-up, what are things that you think people should think about in and around setting up, since GMing and GMing advice is so much your forte, like what do you think makes for the most exciting either story arc or play experience or game promise for a post-apocalyptic setting?
Oh, yeah, great. So I think there's one thing which is crucial to me in any apocalypse is scarcity. So deciding what we don't have and what we need and how far we'll go to get it, I think is really important, because then you get to grapple with those issues of like, we don't have enough for the people we care about. Like, what do we do? Do we all suffer together? Does one of us sacrifice? Like, these are the really interesting questions that I love about post-apocalyptic stuff, is like, in times of scarcity where there truly isn't enough to go around, like, what do we become? Like, what will we do?
The quiet year starts with, what does your civilization need? That's one of the, like, you have to start with, what does your civilization actually have? like that makes it like is the thing that they're bartering, like Gastown, Bullet Town, whatever.
Totally.
Or but what is the thing they desperately need, which is water or whatever? Like yes, this I love this as the core question. Like, what do you need? Like Handmaid's Tale dystopian, they need people who are able to produce other children, and that's also the case in Boy and His Dog.
Oh like, yeah! Oh, Boy and His Dog. That's a great pull.
Like,
oh, boy.
Talk about all right. That's a punchline movie. Do you think that punchline is a downer dark, or do you think it's an upper dark?
That's a downer dark. That's a downer dark, but I'm a sucker for it.
I don't think it's a downer dark. I think it's a hysterical upper dark, like an absurdist. I've lost my mind and become unhinged level of answer. Like it's like yes. There are certain Cold War mental exercises that create those kinds of situations, like. You have books and movies like Catch-22. You have movies and TV shows like MASH. Like, when everything is mad and you're still human, what crazy decisions, and Mad Max, the original Mad Max, what crazy decisions you have to embrace to even function in the slightest.
Right.
So to answer to my answering my own question, you need a scarcity of resources. I need what inherent madness did you embrace to even just keep on going?
Yeah.
That is a quintessential, like, what continues to drive you that is fundamentally against how we live right now.
Yeah, I really like the idea that, when an apocalypse happens, right, it shakes the very core of who you are. It breaks the bedrock of your understanding of reality. And if you don't shove something in there quick, you're going to collapse. So, yeah, so what shim, what crazy thought did you adopt to keep your whole psyche from collapsing?
That's like the Book of Eli is a perfect example. Like Book of Eli is a perfect example. Is Eli like that's another punchline movie? Is Eli really the case or something else? Like A Boy and His Dog and the Book of Eli are like some of my favorite punchline post-apocalyptic stories. That is one thing that can happen in the genre that is even more poignant than other things. You can end up with a punchline, and the punchline can be not what you think. It could be the inevitable. Like, for example, the Frank and Bill episode of The Last of Us. Like,
oh yeah,
it is a punchline. It is not the one you think. It is a gut punch, and it is literally the most beautiful and complete same-sex romance in the history of all forms of television.
What a great episode. True. That was great TV. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what else do you think is a hook for, hey, if I was going to jump in to like a con game or somebody else's game, what should I be looking for that the GM is trying to capture in their teasers or whatever, or in their session 0?
Well, then this is me. This is definitely me personally. Is I'm all about the factions. I'm all about the sort of internecine conflict. So I would be looking for, and of course in Mad Max, best part of Mad Max always the villains. So show me a warlord. Show me a crime boss. Show me a gangster. Show me the Immortan Joe, the Dementis, the Bazo Baz in Blades in the Dark. Show me the opportunist, the opportunistic factions who have taken advantage of this situation and
I absolutely love
resources or monopoly on force have made themselves something they never could have been before society collapsed.
I love that. All right, so that you're looking for that in the setting. That's great. As a player, I'm looking for the opportunity to create the unimaginable expression of that madness. So we're going to go back to the original Mad Max. I'm handing you a saw and explaining the math of cutting cutting through the handcuffs or cutting through your arm while the car is about to explode.
Oh yeah.
Like I want the opportunity for that situation. That is what I am looking for. Ukachaka mentioned a scarcity of Warhammer models. I like
have that. Is there?
I like the idea that I also like the idea of weird things that continue to persist in the post-apocalyptic world. So this month we're celebrating post-apocalyptic stuff because our game End of the Line just crowdfunded yesterday. Hey, we successfully launched. We already got 2 stretch goals in. That's fantastic. But the thing, yeah, so good. But the thing that survives in the End of the Line universe is the bureaucracy of waiting in line, like the DMV and the post office. And so it's this thing that you
the last
really wanted.
Civilization, truly.
Yeah, well, that's just like this idea that this thing continue of all the things that continue, and we could never predict what would save. That is also something that I desperately would love in a post-apocalyptic setting. All right, we're in the final thing. So, what is your takeaways from our hour together, Sean?
I think mine is the marriage of apocalypse and role-playing games. The fundamental marriage is that freedom I was talking about before. One, freedom from the status quo, because in an apocalypse we've already established that the status quo is not ironclad. So the idea that there's actually, in Apocalypse World, it says multiple times, there are no status quos in Apocalypse World. And in a world where there are no status quos, like, you can never be afraid to take big swings, make big changes, like try something wild, do something mad that wouldn't have made sense before you saw the world destroyed. So I think that's why, like, the more I think about it, the more I look at my shelf. Even Dungeons and Dragons. We should meet up again to talk about this. Dungeons and Dragons is post-apocalyptic. Why are there so many ancient, magical, super high-tech treasures buried underground?
Because they're super destructive and they should be buried. That is an amazing point. Also, there's been a lot of people showing up in the live. Bug in particular has been around for this. I don't know if you know Bug, Sean. But Bug's an indie role player, like designer and writes games, and they are currently working on a game about grief. And like I got to hear this at Gamma, and I think it's you that I quote on the regular that like queer furries are changing and setting the direction for where role playing should go.
Great, yeah, absolutely.
And so. That is one of those things. Yeah, I got 2 anyhow. Bug, you're amazing. Drama aside, I feel like I would like to interact more with the people that I love in and around role playing. If you get a chance, I would love that Mark runs our role playing game for you, or you get to see it and all that kinds of stuff. But now that it is at the end of our hour, it is time for you to say where people can find you, what you've got going on next.
Oh, great. Yeah, so you can find me at Scene4 here on TikTok, at Scene4 on Twitter, I think Scene4 on YouTube, and then I'm Scene4 RPG on Instagram. Someone else took Scene4. What I've got going on right now...
is it scene_4 or scene underscore numeral 4?
SCNE_FOUR.
Okay.
And what I've got going on right now, well, I'm actually about to take the week off. But when I come back, I am currently, I'm going to be on a panel for Blades in the Dark. I believe Evil Hat Publishing is crowdfunding right now. They're like, they're series of GM advice panels for running their games on Moonbeam, which I think is that new RPG streaming platform. So you can find me there. You can find me making more videos, perhaps end of July. I'll be back on my regular schedule.
All of that is amazing. I highly recommend, if you have not followed Sean already, for a new way to look at role-playing and constant reminders about how to improve. GMing is like any skill, and when you spend time on one aspect of it, you get better at it. When you don't spend time on it, you get worse. And there's a lot of things that your players could use you to be better at, and one of them is establishing trust, laughter, and rapport with your players. You want a better game? Have a better relationship with your players.
Literally, I if there were a 10 commandments of GMing, love your players.
We should write them. We should write them, Sean. You write them. I will edit them.
I have a doc, a note on my phone that is every time I think of, that would be a good 10 commandment. I think I'm up to 7.
Yes, absolutely. When you finish them, we should look at them and oh yeah, that's so good. That could be an entire series itself. You were a fantastic guest, Sean. I love it when my guest just wants to make them talk more. I saw Dice Dragons Guild was also here in the role-playing end.
Hey.
A lot of new faces as well as some of my favorite in and around from role-playing. One of my best discussions on the live has been with Izzy from Dice Dragons Guild. And we talk about being the first person of any type in a situation. And people of color in role-playing, women, person of color role-playing, GM leading a section is really a thing. And so forth. For Fight in a Box, of course, we are doing content all month in and around for the next 16 days for End of the Line. You can see us on tonight with Board Game Rundown, where I am arguing in Fight Club style, top 5 end times against Tim, Mike, and Bob. It's a hoot when we get together. It's Whiskey Wednesdays. So if you like old, guys bringing up weird references and having drinks, it could be for you. Obviously, Gen Con is coming up. I think our events are all full or almost full. You might want to check that out. You can check out End of Line or Conquest Princess. I think that's what we're focusing on running. Plus other things that we might be doing. I know that I'm doing some mentorship in the BIPOC Lounge of how to get started in the industry as a person of color, and I know I'm running a special version of Conquest Princess in the Tabletop Gamers Lounge. So those are all things that people can look for. A little bit long, but Sean, was this a good experience? Would you come back when you have time?
Absolutely. If I was not traveling next week, I would be here next week, and we would be.
Yeah, all right, but you are fantastic.
I want to talk about dungeon fantasy, and I'm holy shit, that's post-apocalyptic too.
Oh, it's so good. We should talk about Dungeons and Dragons as an apocalypse. Isn't amazing? Maybe that should be one of my months. We'll just talk about Dungeon Crawl. It's Dungeon Crawl month, and we'll talk about Dungeons and Dragons and so forth. That would be absolutely incredible. That we should just make that happen. All right. Final thoughts and goodbyes, Sean.
Thanks for having me on. This was lovely. Let's
you are amazing. Thank you for humoring this old Gasian who is obviously a super fan of your stuff. And as always, everybody, stay safe and have fun. We'll see you next week. Bye.